Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I'm just going to give you a brief bio of myself. I have been working as a counselor for the past 10 years or so. My specialty has been trauma, relationships, and domestic violence. And I've had the good fortune of working closely with Kiran and Interact. And I welcome you all and would welcome any questions you have about me. If there are no questions, I'm going to go ahead with what I'm going to talk about today. The topic today is teen dating violence. And I just have a clarification. The term dating is a little misleading because what it covers is more than dating violence. I would almost prefer to use relationship violence. It's also known as TDV. So during the course of the presentation, we will define what is TDV, what are the factors influencing TDV, the consequences of it, some of the warning signs that parents and teachers can look out for, some practical tips, and some resources that are available to everyone. So let's take a look at this. Is this behavior normal? Let's say that your teen's grades are suddenly dropping. They have become very self critical. They seem more isolated, more depressed. Your teen is spending a lot more time in her room, more than she used to. And most concerning, she does not seem to want to talk. And also, although I'm saying she here, it could be he as well. It applies to everybody. Is this normal? Well, the difficulties, it could be. These are all behaviors that are related to adolescence. Or, on the other hand, it could be the sign of something a little bit more concerning, which we call teen dating violence. So, what is teen dating violence? Teen dating violence is a pattern of behavior that includes physical, emotional, sexual, or verbal abuse used by one person in an intimate relationship with another to exert power and control. The phrase I want you to pay attention to here is power and control, because the ultimate goal of any violent relationship in this pattern is the exertion of power and control over the other partner. TDV is generally defined as occurring between individuals between the age of 13 and 19 years old. It occurs without respect to age, race, religion, or socioeconomic status and sexual orientation. Although this is what research has shown, you will find as we go down the line that people with a different sexual orientation or some minority races are more prone to this than others. So, what are the general types of TDV? Of course, the most violent is physical violence. When a person hurts a partner by use of physical force, kicking, shoving, slapping, any other kind of force to get what they want or to intimidate them. Then there is sexual violence, which is forcing or attempting to force a partner to take part in a sexual act, sexual touching, or non physical sexual event, example, sexting, when the partner cannot or does not consent. And this has unfortunately now become more prevalent, especially the sexting part. And the thing is, for a lot of teens, they're so involved with social media that they cannot block the other person. They want to know what's going on, but then they get bullied by it. Then we come to psychological aggression, which is the use of verbal and nonverbal communication with the intent to harm another person mentally or emotionally or exert control over the other person. Psychological aggression, I find, is the most egregious, also the most subtle, and in some ways the most harmful, because this is the aggression that there's no physical signs to it and the most difficult to detect. And it's also the one, if you take it to the court, It's very difficult to prove psychological aggression. Stalking is another form of TDV. It's a pattern of repeated unwanted attention, contact by a partner that causes fear or concern for one's own safety. What I have found is, in my experience, most commonly is they're following you in the parking lot, they're following you in the car, and very often, they if you're playing a game, they're watching you on the sidelines. It's a very uncomfortable form of behavior. And you've probably all seen this. This is known as the teen power and control wheel because, of course, power and control is the focus of everything. They stratify it a lot more. They get down into the nitty gritties of the different kinds of TDV. And I'll just go through a few of them. Peer pressure is a very important one. Threatening to expose someone's weakness or spread rumors, tell malicious lies about an individual to a peer group. And there is, of course, the anger and emotional abuse, putting them down, making them feel badly about themselves, making him or her think that they're crazy, which is also known as gaslighting, playing mind games, humiliating them, making him or her feel guilty for the abuse, which is a very clever way of doing it. Using social status is usually not so much among teenagers. It's much more, let's say, older teenagers, especially if you have a teen who is married, during which they treat her like a servant, make all the decisions acting like master of the castle, and who has very set ideas about what men should do, what women should do. Intimidation is another one which teens experience. Intimidation is just making somebody afraid by your gestures or your looks. I personally know somebody who just, the husband doesn't have to do anything but, clench his fist, and that's all he needs to do. And the wife is intimidated. Similarly, smashing things, destroying property. And another one is abusing pets. Right now, I know a teenager who is hiding away and is terrified that her abuser, who is in Florida, not here, is going to come and take her pet away because she's so afraid that he will ill-treat the pet. Another form of TDV is minimizing, denying, blaming, making light of the excuse, not really concerned about it, saying that it didn't happen, saying it's all in her mind. And the worst is saying that you made me do it. So it kind of switches the topic around and makes the victim feel like she's the aggressor and is to blame for it. Now, again, I want to emphasize, I keep saying she, but it can be she or he, it can be anybody. Threats, another form of TBD, making or carrying out threats to hurt another person, threatening to leave, threatening to commit suicide, threatening to report him to the police, making him drop charges, and this is the worst, making them do illegal things. Very often they're forced to take drugs or alcohol, which is, it is not good for teenagers. Then, of course, we have the sexual coercion, manipulating or making threats to get sex, getting her pregnant, taking away the children or threatening to, getting someone drunk and drugged in order to have sex, which is actually illegal. Then another subtle form of TDV is isolation, exclusion, controlling who she sees, when she sees, what she sees, limiting outside involvement, using jealousy to justify actions. And this has been very effective. They have often trained their partner enough so that any violent act by them is seen as a sign of jealousy. And jealousy is somehow translated into, oh, I love you so much, that's why I'm jealous. So this is the teen power and control wheel. And I would advise every parent to take a picture of this wheel and stick it up somewhere so everybody can see it. So then we come to, where does this relationship violence occur? Well, it in person, it occurs almost everywhere. In parties, at games, in cars, and in the homes. Electronically, it is all the time. Night, day, when you're sleeping, when you're not sleeping, and it follows you right into the bedroom. And this, of course, consists of teasing, constant text messages, posting indiscreet pictures, social media of all sorts. So, how widespread is it in the US? According to the CDC, 1 in 11 females have experienced TDV. Among males, it's 1 in 15. It's slightly less, but not significantly. As we spoke before, racial minority groups and sexual minority groups are affected disproportionately. And according to the US Department of Justice, girls and women between the ages of 6 and 24 have the highest rates of domestic violence, which is kind of sad. So, is teen dating violence different from adult intimate partner violence? Slightly. It's got its good and bad points. I mean, not really any good points, but its strengths. On the positive side, there is a power dynamic adolescents do not depend on, in the sense that the adolescent is generally not looking to the partner to support her financially. Another big factor is that there are no children involved. So these things make it easier for for TDV to be fixed easier, because you don't have the financial support and there's no children involved. However, there is the negatives, which are teens have limited experience with romantic relationships. They're very poor at negotiating conflict. That's because they haven't been used to it. They're highly influenced by peers. Factors influencing TDV. Culture. Culture is a big factor. In a comprehensive study by Tackett and Leti Monterio, they find that TDV is linked to a patriarchal culture, racism, heterosexism, and poverty. Patriarchal culture, particularly, they point out, because again, as we spoke before, the roles of the woman or the women involved are very clearly defined and is supposed to be subservient to the male. And this affects both the aggressor as well as the victim. Heterosexism is another one. So although there doesn't seem to be that much in the South Asian community, in the South Asian community, when a person is not heterosexual, they have it almost twice as bad as anybody else. And of course, there's poverty, which underlines everything. Any race, culture who are experiencing poverty, it's always worse for them. There are fewer ways of getting out of it. Okay, so we spoke about TDV. In TDV, you can be either the aggressor or you can be the victim. And there are some factors which indicate whether you're going to be the aggressor or you're going to be the victim. So the factors which affect victimization are stress and traumatic events early in their childhood, poverty, community, neighborhood violence, risky behavior, which includes alcohol, substance abuse, violence, having violent friends will do it, exposed to harsh parenting, inconsistent discipline, lack of monitoring. And this is lack of monitoring by the parents. Low self esteem, anger, or depression. All these factors are likely to make the person a victim when they're having a relationship with another teenager. The factors which make a teenager the perpetrator of the aggression are the following: believing or being brought up to believe that you can use threats and violence to get one's way by expressing frustration or anger. And this is a learned behavior. So, this is one they almost always get by watching how their parents behave. So, it is something that can be managed. Problems managing anger or frustration. In most cases, this also is a learned behavior, although there are cases when clinically you're not able to manage your anger, in which case they need to see a doctor or a psychologist. Association with violent peers is a very strong influencer. You hang around with violent peers, you tend to think that violence is the way to get things done. Low self-esteem and depression. Not having parental support or supervision. And again, the home habits, witnessing violence at home or in the community. Factors influencing TDV, as we went over them, are indicators that the person is going to be a victim or is going to be an aggressor. There's one factor which stands out as predicting who is going to be a victim. The single strongest factor predicting victimization is witnessing interpersonal violence between parents. Now, if a person has grown up seeing some pretty strong violence between their parents, they're almost certain at some point in their life to be a victim of the same. Now, there are some parents can also be very protective factors. Parents can be what keeps the person from getting into a relationship like that. But unfortunately, the risk factors are stronger than the protective factors in predicting whether a person will be victim of TDB. And of course, to make things a little bit more exciting, now we have another factor in predicting TDB. These are celebrities. Pop culture is often glorifying an abusive relationship. Now, I don't listen to these people, but I've heard teenagers mention them. The hip hop artist Curtis Jackson, known as 50 Cent, he was charged with TV, but that certainly didn't affect his popularity any. Similarly, Eminem and R&B singer Rihanna talk about the erotic pleasure of being in a violent relationship. Teenagers are so influenced by them, and they really think that if their boyfriend is treating them violently, that this is the start of an erotic relationship with him. And the only way to do it is let them know this is not true. This is just talk. This is for publicity. It's not the case, not in real life. Consequences of TDV. As to be expected, depression and anxiety, unhealthy behaviors like using tobacco, drugs, and alcohol, antisocial behaviors like lying, theft, bullying, or hitting, suicide, and of course, the most dangerous, it's a predictor of future problems, victimization in colleges and marital violence. So, what are the warning signs for parents to see if your teen is in a controlling relationship? We spoke about some of these before. I'm just going to go over them again. Is she losing contact with friends she had before? Are the grades dropping? Does she have to respond immediately to texts and calls? So if she's sitting at the table and a text comes, does she get anxious if she's not able to respond immediately? Makes excuses for his behavior, says it's her fault, calls and texts after midnight. She has bruises she cannot explain. And this is, of course, a very open sign of it. She's becoming more secretive. She's suddenly critical about her appearance, habits, and dress. And an important thing to realize in among these factors is the change. It is important to see what she was like before and is it changing now. If all these things are happening and your teen is going through some kind of a change, this is the time to call it out and talk to her and see what's going on. Now, if you have a relationship with your teen, you can let her know some of the rules about making a safe date. For instance, let your parents know your date's name, place, meet in a safe and populated space, never leave your food unattended, especially drinks. If you need to use the restroom, carry your drink with you. Avoid alcohol if at all possible. If you do take a drink, assuming you're over 18, drink plenty of water. Listen to your gut. If you feel something is not right, leave. Call a friend or a parent. First date should always be a group or double date. Research your date. The parents also can research the date. Learn to say no. Practice with a friend. Carry a safety device. A legal safety device, I must add. So, what are the things that prevent teens from getting into this relationship? The biggest one, of course, is social support. Good friends, good families, good relations, good support among the academic staff, all these help as a protective factor. Good relationship with the mother. This is particularly important. Even for boys, the relationship with the mother is a huge protective is a factor. And what I mean by good relationship, it should be an open relationship. The child should feel safe coming to the mother and talking to the mother. The mother should encourage talking with the child at an early age. Then, of course, we have education about safe dating. This is critical. From the time they are young, or maybe not very young, from the time they are about 11, 12, they should at least be taught some of the things about safe dating so that as they progress and they go out more, they feel safe coming to the mother and talking about it. Finally, conservative upbringing and religion. This can help in keeping the child safe because a conservative upbringing says there are certain boundaries you do not cross, and which is great. The only thing is, we've also found that a conservative upbringing in religion prevents a child from asking for help also. Let's say they've made a mistake and they've gotten into trouble. As opposed to asking for help, now they're frightened. And so they try to hide it up and it makes the matter worse. Actually gives the abuser more control over the victim because they know that the victim does not want to approach their parents about it. And that is this thing, the resources. The best resource I can point out to as far as literature goes, there's something called Dating Matters. It's put out by the CDC. It's a very comprehensive model. It covers everything from how programs for teachers, programs for parents, programs for children, social programs from A to Z. It's very, very comprehensive. And of course, you have the two agencies I have worked with. I found them extremely good. One is Kiran and one is Interact. This was the Dating Matters guide, which I was talking to you about. This is the CDC guide. And as you can see, it's got from capacity planning and assessment, interactive guide policy, dating matters, youth programs, parent programs, training for educators. If an educator or a parent is really interested in this, this is something really worth looking at. It's a wealth of information, more than you can ever use. That basically comes to the end of my presentation. Before I close, I just want to say I have treated teens who've been in violent relationships. And from my personal experience, two things stand out. The teens who fared better were the ones who, as we spoke about, had a good relationship with their parents, an open relationship, a trusting relationship, and were able to bring their concerns up to the parents before it was too late. The second thing that I find was a positive factor in preventing this kind of violence is the education part. And education, if it can be arranged with a group of their friends where it becomes almost in vogue to attend the education programs to see what is teen dating violence and how it is not cool and it should be prevented, that has been a big factor too. I know Interact used to at one time go out to the schools and have programs set up with them where they would come and they would talk to teenagers about it. I'm not sure if Kiran has that program, but that's something really I have found very helpful. And with that, really, I come to the end of my presentation and I'm throwing it open for questions.
Rita, thank you so much. That was incredibly comprehensive. And I'm very glad you brought up the CDC Dating Matters module. We have it on the Karen website, in fact, and have been encouraging people to take a look whenever they have a chance. It seems like we have an abundance of questions actually in the chat box. If you open it up and take a look, feel free to interact within the chat box and verbally. And I encourage the audience to do the same thing as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Rita, would you prefer one of us reading out the questions to you, or?
I'm trying to get this thing down over here. Go ahead, read out the question to me.
Okay, so the first question is, how does a parent find a balance between being an overbearing parent and leaving your teen alone?
Yes, and that is where the education comes in. And I generally find that if you start talking to the teen at an early age, so that the teen is comfortable coming to you and tell them that these are your concerns, but you're doing it for their sake. You also have to, in this particular culture, be aware that the teenagers are adjusting to a culture at home and a culture over here for South Asians. And so it's a little difficult for them. Learn about them, learn about their friends, and talk to the teen openly. Ask them, when do you think I'm overbearing? I know I care for you. I want to do the best for you. If you think I'm overbearing, communicate it to me. I would want to know. I think an open conversation is the best thing. Because different teenagers would feel different things are overbearing. And to build that relationship, ask them. Teenagers know.
So the next question is, I feel that my teen daughter is always dating guys who are just like her abusive father. Is this normal?
Yes, it's very normal. Like we said, one of the biggest factors that influences whether a teen is likely to be in a bad relationship is, if they have parents at home who they've seen in a bad relationship. Unfortunately, this is normal. But the good thing here is that you said, I'm assuming that it's an ex partner who was abusive. Partner, the father's not there right now, and you can. This is a big teaching moment for the teen to say, "This is what happened with your father." And again, I know you need to respect the father, and you could say, couch it as clean terms as possible, but let her know that these things These are some of the red flags. You have a list of red flags we went through over there. A person is abusive, he's trying to, control you. Show her the red flags and let her decide is your partner demonstrating these red flags. If he is, then just be warned that this is what happened to me and I don't want the same thing to happen to you.
Rita, would you recommend the same approach if the parents are still together? I know you were saying, you're assuming that the father is an ex-partner.
Yeah. It becomes very difficult at that point. When the parents are together and if the parents are in an abusive relationship, I would strongly recommend getting a third person in. It doesn't have to be an external counselor. It can be a trusted relative, somebody who it has to be someone the teen looks up to. Getting them involved and talking to them and saying, look, unfortunately, these are the circumstances. The father is here, the mother is here, but the relationship should not be like this. Even better is if after the father and the mother have a fight, if the father, for the sake of the daughter, can come together to the daughter and say, look, what I did was wrong. This is not the way couple should behave. That would have a big influence.
Thank you. So the next question is, my teenage son is very private about his dating life. What is a good way to get him to open up so that I can talk to him?
I would say, does your teenage son have a friend, a cousin, a brother? They are much more likely to open up. Is this from a mother or a father?
I believe it is from a mother. I cannot say from who it is from the question.
I would say if the father can get involved, because boys generally take, although they want to be close to their mother, they generally take direction more from their father. If the father can get involved, or if you can get a cousin involved, and if that doesn't work, neither of them work, I would just sit down with the child and tell him, look, I care for you, I'm concerned about you. Is there something that I can do to help?
The next question is there a best practice in speaking with teenage boys about toxic masculinity in a way that doesn't push them away?
I have found the best way that works is in a group setting. If you can get a bunch of teenage boys together, or friends, and any group of people, get them to a place like Kiran or something, Kiran or Interact, and ask somebody over there to talk to them about toxic masculinity. I find that works better than coming from the individual person. They can reinforce it, but coming from the individual person, the teenage boys sort of don't think their parents are cool enough, and they think that this is not the best advice for them. Given by a third party is much more helpful. Let them learn what is toxic masculinity and how it's not cool.
Thank you. So the next question is, as a parent, what can I do if I know that my friend's teenage child is being abused in a dating relationship?
I would inform the parent. It's too dangerous. I do not want to sneak on the thing. I know there's going to be trouble, but when the child, especially if it's too young, they are in an abusive relationship. At some point, you have to risk. I've seen a situation like this, and it's not pleasant. And tell the parent about it. The other thing you can do is to approach the school counselor. Approach the school counselor and say, I'm concerned about this. I'd like to be kept anonymous. I don't know if they do that or not, but I'm concerned about this. Can you please investigate it?
Next question. South Asian parents do not have certain relevant conversations with their teens. What would your advice be to parents? At what age should a parent start having conversations about dating, sex, and healthy relationships?
I would say, yes, it is true. I mean, I grew up in South Asia. I know we didn't talk about anything at any time. Uh, I would say in this culture, I would err on the side of being early. I would say as early as 12, before puberty hits. I would talk to them about it. And again, the talk is always made, for some reason, especially for different cultures, not the American culture, it's always made better if you can do it in a group setting. You can get a group of people together and have a third person come and give a lecture on them. And then once the person has talked to them, that gives a way in for the parents to bring up the conversation again and to say, let's talk about that. What are the points? You can discuss it over the dining table.
That's some great suggestions. What keeps teens to stay in abusive relationship?
Okay, there are a couple of things. This first, okay, the first you saw the cycle of abuse, the control and power wheel. You've also probably heard of the Stockholm syndrome. And for those who don't know, the Stockholm syndrome is when one person has complete control over another person, like a kidnapper. The kidnapped person ends up worshiping that person because that person has all the control. So that's one reason they stay in the controlling relationship. A different factor could be that the shame is, if the person is I don't know, like a football player or somebody higher on the social status for teenagers, the shame of breaking up with them. And also there is the fear that, the parents will find I'm in this bad relationship. That's why the openness is important for parents, because some teenagers will not tell their parents. They get beat up and they won't tell their parents because the parents will say, I told you not to go into that relationship. So that's a tough one. And again, I would advise, if a situation like that, I would speak to a school counselor, or again, people like Kiran. You've got your resources. Speak to them and say, this is what my teenager is doing. What is the best thing I can do for him? And take a look at the CDC guideline. There are plenty of guidelines from that.
What about non-physical aggression like name calling? Is that dating violence?
Yes, it is. And it's like I spoke before, it is a particularly pernicious way of dating violence because there's nothing to be seen. It's also the easiest to minimize and blame, saying, well, what are you getting so, I was just joking. And it is definitely calling names and making anything that makes the other person feel low, inferior, uncomfortable, sad. Those are all classified as abuse. And the teenager should be taught that if they feel like that, it's abuse, and they should stop it.
Thank you, Rita. I believe I have read out all the questions that were in the chat box. If anyone had any further questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask them. Or if you want to put more questions in the chat box, we do have about 10 more minutes. Please feel free to do so.
Rita, is there a best way that people can get in touch with you if they had any specific questions or wanted to set up a lengthier conversation with you?
Yeah, I'm on Psychology Today.
Okay.
They can always contact me through there, or my personal. I think Kiran has got my personal number. They can call me through there too.
Do you mind, just for the sake of efficiency, saying your number out loud, and then I can put it in the chat box?
Yeah, it's 919 349 8799. 919 349 8799.
Thank you very much.
And the best way to get hold of me really is to text me, because very often I'm in a conference with someone and people feel reluctant to leave messages. So if you text me, I'll look at it and call you back.
All right. Good to know. Yes, I've included your Psychology Today profile as well in the chat box. If there are no further questions from anyone, including Rita, we can bring the presentation to a formal close.
I had one question.
Mm-hmm.
Is Kieran doing everything remotely now?
Yes, we have been.
Rita, do you mind if you can stop sharing the screen, then we can see you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Technical things.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are doing everything remotely. Interact building is still non-functional, but we've been able to do everything that we were doing.
Yeah.
Our support groups, our outreach, whatever we were doing, our client services, we're doing everything remotely.
That's great.
And unfortunately, fortunately, it's always like, we say fortunately because they have us, but unfortunately, we see our numbers increasing. It was all-time high in January. We've seen a little lull right now, but yeah.
No, my numbers are increasing too. I think the COVID has got on everyone's nerves.
Yeah, I think being cooped up, and especially in the winter, earlier people could go take breaks, go out for walks.